Let's get to it. 12. The Piri Reis Map, 1513. In 1929, inside the dusty archives of the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, a German theologian stumbled upon a fragment of a gazelle-skin parchment that would eventually force the U.S. military to admit the impossible. The document was drawn in 1513 by a Turkish admiral named Piri Reis. On the surface, it looks like a standard navigational chart of the Atlantic, filled with Portuguese caravels and mythical beasts. But if you look at the bottom of the map, the playful illustrations disappear, replaced by a coastline that shouldn't exist. It depicts the northern coast of Antarctica, a landmass that wasn't officially discovered until 1820, more than 300 years later. But here is the smoking gun that makes this map a scientific heresy. The map doesn't just show Antarctica, it shows the coastline of Queen Maud Land without ice. In the 1960s, Professor Charles Hapgood sent this map to the U.S. Air Force for analysis. The 8th Reconnaissance Technical Squadron replied with a letter that is now legendary. They confirmed that the coastline on the map perfectly matched the seismic profiles of the subglacial landmass, the actual rock underneath the ice cap. They stated, "The geographical detail shown on the map agrees very remarkably with the results of the seismic profile. We have no idea how the data on this map can be reconciled with the supposed state of geographical knowledge in 1513. Admiral Piri Reis wrote in the margins that he didn't survey the land himself. He compiled it from 20 older source maps. This implies that the source maps were drawn when Queen Maud Land was a habitable, ice-free coast. But here is the million-dollar question. Where did Piri Reis get this data? He actually wrote the answer on the map itself. Stick around for our bonus point 0 at the very end of this video because I'm going to reveal the specific lost library he admitted to using and show you the visual proof. But if Piri Reis was the only one, we could call it a fluke. He wasn't. 11. The Oronce Finé World Map, 1531. 18 years after Piri Reis, a French mathematician named Oronce Finé designed a heart-shaped projection of the world that creates an even bigger problem for mainstream historians. While Piri Reis showed us a fragment of the coast, Finé gives us the whole continent. His map depicts a massive southern landmass, Terra Australis, centered precisely on the South Pole. But it doesn't show a blank white void. It shows mountain ranges, estuaries, and river valleys carving their way through the land. It depicts a continent that is alive, not dead. When you overlay the Oronce Finé map with modern surveys of the bedrock beneath the Antarctic ice cap, the similarities are statistically impossible to ignore. The map details specific mountain ranges in the Ross Sea area that are currently buried under thousands of feet of glacial ice. More damning are the rivers. The map clearly shows rivers flowing from these mountains into the sea. For those rivers to exist as liquid water, the climate of Antarctica had to be temperate. Modern glaciology tells us that the Ross Sea ice shelf has been frozen solid for at least 4,000 years. This means Oronce Finé was copying from source maps that were thousands of years old, maps created by a civilization that navigated the globe when Antarctica was a green paradise. But if the rivers on the map are real, then the ice cap is a relatively new addition to our planet. This suggests that the history of human civilization is far older and more complex than the timeline taught in universities. But Finé didn't just show us the mountains. Another cartographer managed to separate the land itself. Fast forward to 1737. Philippe Buache, a leading French geographer, publishes a map that is perhaps the most baffling of them all. Most ancient maps depict the southern continent as a singular massive blob to balance out the land in the north. Buache did something different. He drew Antarctica as two distinct landmasses separated by a waterway running through the center of the continent. For 200 years, this was dismissed as a cartographer's fantasy, a guess that happened to look cool on paper. Then came the International Geophysical Year of 1958. Scientists used advanced seismic sounding technology to penetrate the miles-thick ice sheet for the first time in history. What they found shocked the geological world. Antarctica is not one single continent, it is an archipelago. Specifically, it is divided into two major landmasses, East and West Antarctica, separated by the Transantarctic Mountains and a subglacial trench that would be a seaway if the ice melted. Buache had depicted the topography of the bedrock perfectly. There is no way Buache could have guessed this. He was copying something much older. But while Buache was revealing the hidden shape of the land, the most famous mapmaker in history was hinting at its massive scale. 9. The Mercator projection, 1569. You know Gerardus Mercator. His projection is likely hanging on your wall right now. It's the standard navigation map used by Google Maps and sailors alike. We are told he was a genius of the Renaissance, inventing modern navigation. But Mercator's 1869 world map contains a detail that is usually edited out of modern textbooks. Occupying the bottom of the globe is a gargantuan landmass labeled Terra Australis Nondum Cognita, the southern land not yet known. Mainstream history claims Mercator included this landmass purely for philosophical balance, believing there had to be land in the south to counter the weight of Europe and Asia in the north. But looking closely at his depiction, we see specific promontories and bays that align with the actual geography of Antarctica. Mercator himself admitted that he wasn't guessing. He wrote that he was basing his work on charts of old. He was preserving a piece of geography that had been lost to the modern world, waiting for Captain Cook to discover it centuries later. The presence of this continent on the most famous map in history proves that the knowledge of Antarctica was never truly lost. It was just suppressed or forgotten. But maps are just ink on paper. To truly prove the continent was green, we need physical evidence from the soil itself. 8. The fossilized forest evidence. High in the Transantarctic Mountains, about 300 miles from the South Pole, geologists made a discovery that shattered the ice forever narrative. They found wood. Not petrified wood that had turned to stone over hundreds of millions of years, but fossilized roots, stems, and even preserved leaves of the Nothofagus, or southern beech tree. These weren't tropical ferns from the dinosaur age. These were hardy, temperate trees similar to what you'd find in New Zealand or Chile today. Here is the tribal trigger where you have to choose your side. The mainstream scientific establishment dates these forests to about 3 million years ago, claiming the continent has been a frozen wasteland ever since. They refuse to budge on this timeline. However, alternative researchers point to the pristine condition of the wood and the ancient maps we've just discussed to suggest a much more radical theory, the flash freeze. They argue these trees were standing just 12,000 years ago before a cataclysmic event flash froze the continent. If science is right, the maps are fake. If the maps are real, the carbon dating is wrong. Which side are you on? The existence of a forest near the South Pole implies a climate so different that it breaks our understanding of Earth's cycles. But if there were trees, there had to be a way to get there. And one globe from 1515 shows the exact route. 7. The Schöner Globe, 1515. 5 years before Magellan set sail on his famous circumnavigation of the globe, Johannes Schöner created a wooden globe that depicted the world with startling accuracy. What stands out is the south tip of South America. Schöner clearly depicts a narrow strait separating the continent from a southern landmass. Today, we call this the Strait of Magellan. The problem? Magellan hadn't found it yet. He wouldn't pass through it until 1520. Schöner's globe doesn't just show the strait, it shows the land to the south of it, Antarctica, positioned exactly where it should be. The official history books tell us Magellan was flying blind, desperately searching for a passage to the Pacific. But this globe suggests he knew exactly where he was going, because the maps already existed. He wasn't an explorer, he was a tourist following a guide. This proves that the connection between the Atlantic and Pacific was charted long before the Age of Discovery. But if the maps were accurate about the water, what were they telling us about the speed of the disaster that froze the land? Number 6. The flash freeze animals. It wasn't just trees that were found where they shouldn't be. The evidence of a rapid climate shift, a flash freeze, is not limited to the Antarctic coast. It is a global phenomenon that suggests the poles shifted instantly. In the northern counterpart to Antarctica, deep in the Siberian permafrost, excavators have found woolly mammoths frozen solid in an upright position. The most famous, the Berezovka mammoth, was found with undigested buttercups still in its mouth and stomach. The biological implications are horrifying. Buttercups are delicate flowers that grow in temperate climates. For a mammoth to freeze with fresh flowers in its mouth, the temperature had to drop from a pleasant summer day to minus 150 degrees Fahrenheit in a matter of hours, if not minutes. It happened so fast, the animal couldn't even swallow. If this happened in the north, the same mechanism, a crustal displacement or pole shift, would have slammed Antarctica into the deep freeze at the exact same moment, preserving the landscapes we see on the Piri Reis Map, under a mile of ice. This wasn't a slow geological creep over millions of years, it was a planetary light switch being turned off. And if the climate could change that fast, it explains the incredible detail on the largest map ever created. Number 5. The Urbano Monte Map, 1587. In 1587, Urbano Monte created a masterpiece that was physically impossible to view until the digital age. It was a massive atlas consisting of 60 separate sheets that, if assembled, would create a world map 10 feet wide. Recently, Stanford University digitally scanned and assembled the sheets, revealing the world as Monte intended. The centerpiece of this projection is the North Pole, but the outer ring is dominated by a massive green Antarctica. Monte's map doesn't just show land, it shows an ecosystem. The Antarctic coast is dotted with mountains, grassy plains, and depictions of animals that look like camels, lions, and even unicorns. Skeptics dismiss this as artistic license, here be dragons style filler. But given the accuracy of the rest of the map, including the correct shapes of Japan and California, it is dangerously arrogant to assume he was just doodling on the southern continent. He was likely copying from sources that described a thriving ecosystem. The Urbano Monte map is a portrait of a world that was erased. But what mechanism could possibly turn a land of camels and green plains into an ice shelf overnight? The answer might be found in a theory that terrified Albert Einstein. The Earth crust displacement theory. This is the most controversial concept in geology, and it is the tribal trigger that divides the academic world. In the 1950s, Professor Charles Hapgood proposed that the outer crust of the Earth is loose, like the skin of an orange floating on the fleshy fruit inside. He theorized that a build-up of ice at the poles could cause the crust to become unbalanced and slip over the mantle. This would move a continent like Antarctica, which was sitting in a temperate zone, areas where trees grew, into the polar zone in a matter of days or weeks. Here's the kicker. Albert Einstein wrote the foreword to Hapgood's book, supporting the physics behind the theory. Mainstream geologists hate this. They insist on plate tectonics, where continents drift at the speed of fingernail growth. But the crust displacement tribe argues that the slow drift cannot explain the flash-frozen mammoths or the Piri Reis Map. The crust slipped, the world ended, and we're the survivors with amnesia. Was the skin of the Earth loose then? Is it loose now? If the crust shifted, it explains why the maps show a green continent. But to draw those maps, you need math that supposedly didn't exist in the ancient world. The Haji Ahmed map of 1559. Another Turkish cartographer, Haji Ahmed, produced a world map in 1559 that creates a mathematical paradox. The map depicts the Americas and the Antarctic coast with a distinct and modern shape. But the anomaly here is the projection itself. The grid lines and the distortion of the continents match a sophisticated form of spherical trigonometry that is incredibly difficult to calculate without precision instruments and advanced calculus. The shape of the Antarctic coast on this map is so accurate that it suggests the original cartographers knew the exact size of the Earth. To create a map of this quality, you need to solve the problem of longitude, something European sailors couldn't do reliably until the invention of the chronometer in the 1700s. Haji Ahmed's map is proof that the source maps were created by a civilization that had mastered geodesy, the science of measuring the Earth, thousands of years before us. We are looking at the legacy of a forgotten science. But if they had the math and they had the ships, the final question is, who were they? The Southern Lost Civilization. If Antarctica was green, temperate, and larger than Europe, and if it was mapped with high-tech precision, then it wasn't just a nature preserve. It was likely inhabited. This leads us to the most seductive theory of all. Antarctica is the lost continent of Atlantis. Plato described Atlantis as a massive island beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the Atlantic, that was destroyed by a cataclysm of water and earthquakes in a single day and night of misfortune. This matches the Earth-crust displacement theory perfectly. If the crust slipped, the ocean would have washed over the continent as it moved to the pole, freezing the civilization in place. We have been looking for Atlantis underwater in the Mediterranean, but we should have been looking under the ice. The maps are the only surviving records of this lost homeland, copied and recopied by sailors who didn't understand what they were drawing. It sounds like science fiction until you realize that we aren't the only ones looking. The most advanced eyes in the world are currently focused on the ice, and they have found something. The digital archaeologists scouring Google Earth found anomalies that defy explanation. Massive, symmetrical structures buried under 2 miles of ice have been detected using heat signature mapping. Some of these structures resemble pyramids, others look like star forts. But here's the payoff. When you overlay the coordinates of these structures with the key locations marked on the Piri Reis Map, they align. The ancient mapmakers marked cities or key landmarks on the coast of Queen Maud Land, and today satellites are picking up heat signatures in those exact locations. The U.S. government runs massive operations in Antarctica, and the Antarctic Treaty forbids any private exploration or drilling. Why are they guarding a block of ice so closely? Perhaps the Piri Reis Map isn't just a historical curiosity. Maybe it's a treasure map. But remember what I told you at the beginning? Piri Reis didn't draw that map himself. He copied it. So who drew the original? We've looked at 12 impossible maps, but we have ignored the most important confession of all. In the margins of his famous parchment, Admiral Piri Reis wrote a note that acts as a disclaimer. He explicitly stated that he was not the author of the geography. He admitted he was merely a compiler, a scribe piecing together a puzzle from 20 charts, including 8 maps labeled as Jafariya, documents dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. Piri Reis wasn't a psychic, he was a librarian. He was holding documents that were already ancient in the year 1513, survivors of a lost world. To see what Piri Reis saw, we have to look at these 2 specific Ptolemaic plates. First, look at this regional chart of Asia. Notice the labels for the Magnus Sinus and the Procida Maris. In a modern map, the ocean below India is empty, but here the blue water is bounded by land at the very bottom. The grid lines and coordinates along the edges prove these weren't sketches, they were products of advanced spherical trigonometry. Now, look at how these regional plates fit into the Ptolemaic world map. This massive circular projection reveals the truth. The ancients believed the Indian Ocean was enclosed by a gargantuan southern landmass, terra incognita. Piri Reis took these highly detailed regional plates, like the Asia chart, and stitched them into a global masterwork. He was preserving a map of a world that hadn't been frozen yet, drawn by a civilization that had mastered the stars and the seas, while our official ancestors were still living in caves. The tragedy is that Piri Reis's map is just a torn fragment. The rest of the Alexander maps are likely dust, lost in the fires of the Library of Alexandria. But these surviving plates prove that the age of discovery was actually an age of recovery. Columbus and Magellan weren't finding new worlds, they were desperately hunting for the world shown on these ancient scrolls. If the maps are this accurate, what else did the ancients know that we've spent the last 2,000 years forgetting? The maps are real. The seismic data is real. The only thing that is fake is the timeline they taught you in school. If the ice melts, we won't just find dirt. We will find the ruins of the map makers themselves and the technology they used to survey the globe while the rest of the world was still in the Stone Age. But here's the thing. A map is just a tool. To draw with that level of precision, you need more than a compass. You need high-altitude surveying, advanced mathematics, and perhaps even technology we are only now rediscovering. I'm currently digging into the blueprints of this lost tech, the ancient machines that built the pyramids and mapped the poles, but I only produce what the inner circle wants to see. If you want the full breakdown on the lost tech of the ancients, I need you to do two things. First, drop a comment below with the words "lost tech" so I know you're ready. Second, hit that subscribe button to join the 1% who actually look behind the curtain of history. If the interest is there, that video is next.